When we took my mother back to Montreal in 1996, it was the summer she just turned 80, and we went to the school. So I went up and I stood in the doorway of the principal's office, and he looked up and he blinked, and I think he got a little pale. And he looks at the picture and he looks at me. And I said, "Hello." I said, "I'm John Rennie's daughter." He said, "I know."
April 27th, 1956 might not be a date that's well known to you, but it might very well be one of the most important dates in Pointe Claire and the Lakeshore's history, for it's the date that the Lakeshore's very first high school officially opened, changing the landscape of the area and the English public school system indefinitely. The first school was John Rennie High School, a great school named after a deserving man. But was he really deserving? Does anyone really know who he was? There's plenty of buildings here in Montreal and around the world who are named after people where you can still make a connection to the individual. But in my opinion, the name John Rennie is more connected to the building itself rather than the man it was named after. So let's try to fix that. And who better to reconnect the school to the person but his only child, Margaret.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Born in Brooklyn in the Chateauguay Valley on November 14th, 1904, John Rennie was the son of Fred Rennie, who was considered one of the pioneers of the Eastern Townships and whose family goes back to the early 1800s.
He was the eldest of three, and he was brought up with this idea that education was highly important.
He attended Huntington Academy High School and went to Bishop's University, where he earned a BA majoring in economics and political sciences, graduating in 1929. Now, John Rennie, at this early moment in his life and career, was very interested in education, and this interest is what brought him to the Lakeshore. A life-changing decision not only for him, but for a young lady who lived here in Valois. From 1930 to 1934, John Rennie was hired as principal at Valois Elementary, that cute little school which is today a cute little library. And it was where he met a young Ruth Davison, a young student who he taught and who had caught his eye.
She was taught by my father when she was in the 9th grade, and he taught science. And she remembered distinctly him standing on a chair in the middle of the room with a baseball or something, showing how it rotated around the ceiling light, which was the sun. She was about 17 when they started going out. She had not graduated from high school. They were going out. He wanted to take her to her senior dance, and she told him he was too old because he was 29.
John would go on to teach at Cedar Park Elementary and eventually become assistant superintendent for Pointe Claire's Protestant schools from 1935 to 1936. He then married the love of his life, Ruth, in 1940, though the newlyweds barely had a chance to build a home together before John decided that same year that they were married to serve his country and join McGill's Canadian Officers Training Corps and later become a member of the Black Watch, eventually serving overseas from 1944 to 1946.
I mean, my father was in his 30s when the war began, and there's a letter in his papers that I do remember reading where it was, they weren't sure they wanted to take him to enlist. And this one fellow said, no, this man's a good man. He can do things. He may not be a foot soldier. Well, he had wonky heart and wore glasses, but he can be valuable, and he was an administrator and a teacher. He taught French to the Americans, I think. I'm not sure, when they were in France. He traveled all over. I have his war letters. He would write my mother somewhere in Germany, somewhere in France, somewhere in Can you guess where I am this week?
A letter from October 1944. Ruth, dearest, this is going to be just a little note, girlie. He always called her girlie. To let you know I've moved again. From the address above, you'll see
that it has been quite a move. For once, this is not going to be a whole volume, just a little note. To let you know, I think you're the finest wife in the world, and that I love you very much. And with that, my sweet, I'm off to bed. Good night, and all my love. John.
After retiring from the military with the rank of major, in 1947 John decided to run for political office, and with the help of Maurice Duplessis was elected member of the National Union Party for Huntington in the Legislative Assembly.
My father had been a person with a capital P in the town. He was the member of the National Assembly. It was called the Legislative Assembly at the time, and he was well known.
In 1949, the provincial government appointed him to be a member of the committee of the Quebec Council of Education and was chairman of the committee's building subcommittee. And once again, the subject of education became his #1 priority.
My father was involved in the government's committee to get the school built.
This school?
John Rennie, yes. He was instrumental in working on that project. He was very interested in making sure that these students got an opportunity to have a high school.
So everything was on the up and up in John's life. Wife, politics, until 1952.
Well, my father had a heart attack. He came from a long line of men with, as he would put it, dicky hearts. He had a second heart attack in early 1952 and went into hospital and was recovering, and they had let him go to a political meeting on a Saturday evening. And he called my mother Sunday morning and talked to her, and she told me this. And then she went off to church. Then she went to dinner at her in-laws, got back from that, and within a few minutes, the priest was at the door. And she knew exactly why he was there. My father had keeled over about 10 minutes after they'd finished their conversation. It was massive heart attack, and he was gone. They had just celebrated their 11th anniversary, and he knew my mother was pregnant.
So when it became time to name this new high school, it was no wonder that Ivan Stockwell, superintendent of the high school, decided to name it John Rennie.
Yeah, no, John Rennie's high school was a memorial to my father, basically, yeah.
At the opening ceremonies on April 27th, 1956, at 8 p.m., hundreds from the community showed up, as well as Maurice Duplessis, many dignitaries, the mayor, and of course, Ruth Rennie. She was there to reveal the memorial stone dedicated to her late husband. Mr. W. Steeves from the Department of Education was there to pay tribute to him as well, and termed him a soldier, a citizen, and a great Canadian. So next time you find yourself in Pointe Claire and have the privilege of driving past the Lakeshore's first high school, take a minute to think about the school, what it meant at the time of its opening, and what it still means to the community that surrounds it. And also, take a minute to think about the man who it was named after. The principal, the teacher, the veteran, the leader, the father, the great Canadian, John Gillis Rennie.